what is it actually like to run a nonprofit? What do they need to think about when they set up? What do they need to think about ongoing? What's like a big overview for them?
I'd say a lot of people jump into the nonprofit space with completely sort of way in over their head, not really knowing what to do, what the key issues are. I see it all the time. Like, I help people 2 or 3 years down the track fixing a lot of things because they just didn't realize what was involved. People think it's a non-profit. It's easy. You just go out and you do good things. But the reality is it's a lot similar, or it's more harder actually to set up and start than running a for-profit company. So when you start a for-profit, you still have to register, whether you're a charitable trust or an incorporated society or something like that. You need to register with the company's office. And then if you want charity registration, you've also got to sign up a second time with the charity services, which is going extremely slow at the moment. I know I've got some clients, they say it takes 10 weeks to get their registration, but some of my clients it's taken more like 15 to 20 weeks. And that can have a massive impact on a non-profit who's trying to get up and running for a number of reasons. So there's a lot of compliance and setting things up, and then you got to think about your banking, you got to think about your accounting program so you can record everything, make sure it's correct. You do need to worry about income tax, potentially, if you don't have that exemption, or GST registration. Are you going to have employees? So there's a lot to actually consider. It's exactly the same stuff as running a business. But a lot of people just jump in because they have a great idea and they're like, I want to help people, and they jump in.
What makes
so
it
that's
different?
where
What makes it different from profit? Like, because I mean, I used to represent charities. I raised a few $1 million, and I felt disenchanted when I understood how the books worked a bit. What makes it different? Like, do they have a higher, stricter integrity? Do they need to make sure that the way they file, they earn less money? Or what makes it non-profit? Like, could you pay yourself $500,000 but not pay tax? Like, why is it unique?
you could, but
You could? Oh, yeah.
but I don't know how long you last. But yeah, that's probably where the problems start to arise, is if you didn't do all this legwork up front to sort of get everything set up, think about it properly, you'll start to run into these problems down the future, 2-3 years, or even from the start, from the get-go. Because the biggest difference in the non-profit sector is probably your revenue streams, where you get your money from. Like, quite often, I've worked in the industry a long time, and I say to everyone, it's kind of like, it's a triangle of issues. You got 3 key issues in this industry. And it's kind of like one of those situations, pick 2 that you can fix, but you can never fix all 3. But they're sort of like funding, expertise, so having people within the organization who actually know what they're doing and able to run it, and time. So having enough time to actually do these things. So a lot of my clients that I'm helping, we're trying to solve these 3 problems. And depending on what's sort of going on, you can have troubles raising funds. So like a lot of non-profits, where they're different from companies, they're not selling widgets or services, whatever it is. They're delivering public benefits for the most part, which means they could be hugely reliant, like 90, 100% reliant on grant funding from a local council or a gaming trust or something, which can be a massive risk to them because there's no guarantee that they'll get the same amount of money as last year. There's no guarantee that they'll get any money at all, really. What if change of government, change of council, and they just cut their funding? So some of my clients I work with being, thinking about different revenue streams, like, do you need to sell something? Is there a sort of retail side that could be useful for your charity? Or do you need a membership drive? Do you need membership fees or donations? Have you got the ability to easily facilitate donations for your charity from people in your corner of the world? So sometimes we need to tackle those issues like that about diversifying revenue, because there's, and with all of these revenue streams, there is risks. So you do need to sort of look at that a bit more closely than perhaps a business where you're solely focused on actually, delivering a minimal viable product to the market and then advertising and selling it and then printing profit as if it was that easy. But the biggest difference is probably revenue sources that are seeing non-profits, but then they have these other struggles like companies. It's normally easier to retain or attract staff to a for-profit company because it just makes sense. The business values that employees' inputs because the business can see the outputs in terms of profit that they get from hiring someone who's got a really high skill set. And that's why you can see that CEOs of like Amazon or whatever get paid millions and billions of dollars, but you don't see them running a non-profit because the value proposition is a bit different. Because non-profits are more focused on delivering community benefits, which doesn't really get measured in dollars the same way. So it's harder to actually, I think people don't value the work in non-profits as highly, so therefore it's not always attached with as high as a salary or competitive package, so you don't always get people with the best skill set to run these organizations. And so that's where I sort of like try and come in and help people, because obviously I'm specialized in non-profit accounting. So that's one of the key areas I try to help them.
Well,
and
what's
then the last one.
Oh, you go. Yeah.
Sorry. And the last one was time. Yeah, so that's the other thing I try to help people with is time, because I do come across people and they're really smart. They know what they're doing. They have funding, but they just don't have time to do everything. So, that's where we come in and help actually, we'll spend the time looking at the finances and cleaning the books and doing that sort of stuff for them so that they don't need to worry about it and they can go off and do what they're good at.
Yeah, I don't get like you see things like Simplicity or whatever, $1 billion of funds under management, the KiwiSaver provider, and they're non-profit. I don't like, how do you become non-profit? Like, I know you got to do the registry, but like, let's say you paid your staff 80% of all the donations or whatever. Like, is there like some criteria where it becomes unethical? And what's the benefit? Do you just not get tax stuff? Like, how is it different?
Yeah, good question. So probably there's a high level of accountability for non-profits, I guess, because they're normally receiving public funding and delivering public benefits, that there's this higher level where they have to report back to their funders. I guess that's privately, they always reporting back accountability to, you gave me $100,000. I said I was going to do X with it. Then they've got to prove that they did X with it, whether that was feeding kids or paying their staff. And sometimes there's audits involved in that. But the other side of it as well is they have to report all this information publicly, like their financials every single year. Yeah, that's where the compliance side comes in. And so all of that's managed by, like, charities are managed by Charity Services, which is the Department of Internal Affairs. They record all that information. They pass a lot of it on to other government organizations, and then you've got a bunch of incorporated societies and other types of legal entities, and they still have to upload their documents or report back on their financials to whatever register with the company's office that they're on. So I guess, like, if you were receiving $1 million of funds and paying yourself out $500,000, people can see it. The funders that you apply to, they're always going to ask for your financial statements. They're going to see it. They're going to see that company A or non-profit A is paying himself a $500,000 salary, and because they've got to decide where they put their money, and then they'll see that another non-profit, they might be only paying himself $400,000. So they're like, we'll give this money to this guy because he can do a little bit more with it.
So it's really just like public perception and then keeping your promise. So if you say, hey, 80% of your donations are going to go to the kids or whatever, as long as you keep that promise. Because like I always struggled with essentially what I was doing, they called us a chugger, a charity mugger. So we're a marketing company that represented the charity, and we were raising like billions of dollars a year, and there were ongoing donations. So a person will sign up the first year, 80% of it went to the marketing company, and then the charity didn't have to pay anything up front, and then they would keep the donations after that, and they stayed on average for about 4 years, which completely depends how you look at it. The donors weren't happy with it. I would say it's unethical, but it also solves a problem for the charity. So I always wondered, it's like essentially we would guilt trip people enough so they felt good that they could buy back that guilt. And it's fundamentally a flawed way to raise funds. There's no value exchange. So let's say
I think there's still a value exchange there. I think the problem that you're talking about is a perception problem of the marketing, because I think it's a lot similar to business than you realize. Like you're just talking about the way it was structured, because obviously not everyone can afford to do work for free, and that's not what for-profit companies like your marketing company is there for. So you said like they don't charge an upfront fee. They just collect 80% of the first year. Like this is a good way in which that, and like you already know the lifetime value of your customer, your donee, is for 4 to 5 years. So it's not like you're not delivering value. You're delivering a 4 to 5 year value to this, to whatever charity you're running. You're taking 80% of the first year. So that's probably, it's probably maybe like a 10 to 20% commission, really, if you look about it. Now, whether that's up front before the charity receives any money, if it's 80% of that first year, or if you're taking that 10% of all earnings across those 4 to 5 years, it doesn't really matter. It's sort of the same result at the end of the 4 to 5 years. But I think there's still value being delivered there. Like you're getting money in the door, as long as you can prove that you're actually helping facilitate that before.
Well, I just mean for the donor. So like you look at these World Vision ads or these, in Palestine, the kids struggling and stuff, like you're helping and you feel good, but essentially you're paying down an emotional feeling. So I feel like, why can't a nonprofit be, you exchange value that helps other people as well as giving value to the actual donor? So for example, you might have access to mentorship and events where people can ask direct questions of these successful people in a particular domain, and 50% of the profits or whatever, 50% of the revenue goes to underprivileged kids or whatever. So it's an exchange of value. But so how does what do you actually have to file differently? So can you write everything off on tax? Like you're sitting at home, your house is under the charity, so you're like, oh yeah, write it off. Like what how does it work?
Well, we still have income tax laws in New Zealand, and basically you can get an exemption to it, but it doesn't mean that you can't be fully exempt if you don't then start taking for-profit activities. So if I reach for a charity, I can get that income tax exemption, but then if I start doing for-profit things and the IRD come looking, they can cancel that exemption and also make me pay tax. So there are rules around what you can and cannot do, like any business, for what is deductible and not. And the whole idea of this thing in tax for-profit businesses saying, expenses are deductible as long as they're nexus to income, which basically means if your expense is incurred in delivering income, it's a deductible expense. So if I go out and pay advertising to get client fees, that advertising got me the income, so therefore I can offset it against that income. Now, things like if this similar sort of applies to a non-profit or charity. So if I'm out there delivering food parcels and I've got income tax exemption, so I'm getting funding to do this and I'm spending money on delivering food parcels, but then I'm also got in the books that I'm buying myself a $500,000 Lamborghini, I think you would find that they would look at that pretty poorly, and if not, I'd probably get in a lot of trouble for that.
But you're joining the Lamborghini club with high net worth individuals, and then you raise, what if you raise $10 million from that $1 million purchase?
Yeah, but I guess the way you would look at it is that there's a bit of for-profit advantage there, because at the end of the day, a non-profit's not owned by an individual. So if you're doing anything outside of the market norms, um, like say the work I do is worth $100,000 running this charity, but then I'm paying myself $1 million. I mean, that's kind of just like paying myself $100,000 salary and taking a $900 dividend every single year. But I'm not the owner of this charity or non-profit. It's not a business. So why am I paying myself $1 million? That seems way outside of the market norms. So that's what I mean when there is some scope in the law that says, look, if because you can find, it's very rare, but you can find some non-profits that part of them, they're kind of divisional, but part of their operations will be non-profit and income exempt, but then they might do other things as well that do have a for-profit purpose, and they will pay income tax on that stuff. So it's not to say it doesn't exist totally, but yeah, there's rules in there to sort of differentiate between the different activities that a non-profit might do. But yeah, that's quite complicated, and most
Can you sell it?
non-profits don't.
Can you grow a non-for-profit and then sell it?
No, because what are you selling? You don't own the non-profit, right?
Yeah, you're saying that the ownership, it's not individually owned. What do you mean? I don't really get that.
So when you register a company, you'll register who the shareholders are. Like if I start up company A today and Willie Eyles owns 100 ownership shares, and no one else owns anything, I'm the owner. I'm the shareholder. I own those 100 shares, and those 100 shares are a proxy for the company that I've just legally created. But when you're creating a say like a charitable trust, works a bit differently. There's no ownership shares in a charitable trust. There's trustees. So the trust, well, this is probably quite an important distinction that I didn't bring up earlier. When you're starting up a non-profit or a charity or something, you'll have something that's along the lines of constitution or a trust deed, and that will have all these rules set out in it that sort of line up with New Zealand law on the Trust Act and the Charities Act and all this sort of stuff. And it basically lays out what happens, what's the structure of the organization, so if it's run by a board or a committee, how many people are on that committee, and they're sort of the guardians. Like you can think of it very much like a normal trust. You got trustees here. Who are the benefactors? That might be the members of the club or society, if it's like a sporting organization or something, or it might be, denoting certain demographics. This might be drawn out in the values or the purpose section of their rules as well on who they're going to deliver value for. And then there'll be a bunch of other things in the rules as well, stating what they should and shouldn't do. So I guess that's like the biggest difference there is, a company's owned by someone, whereas a trust is set up for the benefit of a group of people, and then you just have appointed trustees. And so these people can be removed or added as per the trust rules. But these people don't actually own the trust. They're just helping govern and then sometimes manage. And there is a specific rule that needs to be included in there that, in your trust rules, that the trust should not operate for any, can you say this word, pecuniary profit? Okay. Basically, you can't own a trust for personal gain, is in layman's terms, is what the rule states, and it has to be in there, otherwise you won't get approved to be a non-profit or a charity to begin with. So that's quite important, which means like if I set something up and I was taking money from the government or local communities or whatever to run my my charity for feeding homeless people, but then I was just, it turned out all the homeless people were my friends and family and myself included. So I had no expenses for food. Maybe I bought myself a house as well. Well, you can kind of look at BLM in America, the recent controversy that it was in 2 years ago now. I think when they found out that the owners of some of the chapters of that had been buying themselves, like, I think it was the California BLM, bought themselves like a $6 million house and then bought all their family houses and stuff. That's a really good example of how not to run a non-profit or charity. Like, that's for personal profit. That's not benefiting BLM. That's just, benefiting your family.
Yeah, that's wild. So you can pay yourself pretty good, but not too much to the point where it's a guarantee, like you're promoting yourself and it has to be reasonable in terms of market. Like,
Yeah, I'd say like,
CEO, I mean, CEOs make good money, 200 grand.
it can be justified. But at the end of the day, I think if you look at what the key driver of a non-profit is, it's their value, their purpose, their mission. So if that's to deliver food for homeless people, they've got to make sure that they're doing that to the best. Now, they might say they want to feed 1 million homeless, like that's their target. Whereas for a company, it's about making shareholder value, making the owner more profits. And so when you're hiring people, it's all about maximizing your goal, no matter what that is. So you could completely justify paying a CEO of a non-profit organization $1 million. If, say the last CEO you paid, use a better example. Say you had a CEO, you're paying them $500,000 and they were delivering $500,000 food or $500,000 parcels to homeless people. And say next year you're like, that's not good enough. I want 10 million homeless people fed. And so you fire the old CEO and then you hire the next guy who might cost you $750,000. So he costs you a lot more. But he actually hits those goals. So now you've gone from delivering 500,000 homeless people to 10 million or whatever. You've just blown your goals out of the park. Like, hands down, you would say that $250,000 was well spent because, like, we 10x'd the amount of benefits that we could deliver to meet our goals. Like, you're looking at it from that sort of point of view. It's like, for what money we have, what are the outcomes we can get? And most of the time, it's not the answer is not just paying your CEO more. That's what the board's there for, to try and think through these sort of things. Most of the time, it's not. That's not the answer. It's doing different things, but sometimes it is a change in who your CEO is, or it always depends. But I wouldn't rule it out. It's just not very often you see it in the industry.
So it's just value for money, yeah. So as long as they do a good job, you can just, like, let's say they were getting 30% commission or whatever of what they bring in, and that equated to $2 million. I mean, you could probably justify that because they're only getting a percentage and the value beyond that. That's go up. How do you, like, where do people go wrong? So they start the nonprofit, this charity, they're really inspired, they want to help people. Do they do things wrong with the structure? Do they do things wrong with the taxation, or do they just not get a revenue? Where do people come unstuck?
Probably the biggest problem I see when people come to me is probably the first things around taxes. So they'll be running the organization for 2 or 3 years, and then they get a call from the IRD because they haven't been filing their GST returns, or potentially they have employees as well, and they haven't been filing the PAYE, therefore they haven't been paying anything. The PAYE one's quite bad because you've got to think that that's people's personal, like, GST is bad, but if you're missing people's PAYE taxes, that's doubly bad because that's, as an organization, it's your responsibility to be paying these individuals income tax on their behalf, as well as their KiwiSaver, like it's their retirement and stuff. So I've definitely seen people, it's just, they're not aware of how important it is, and they're just like, they're just so focused on running their organization that they don't take care of the paperwork at the end of the day. And if they're not doing that, then they're not on paying any of this money to the IRD, and so then the IRD is not passing it on to these people's KiwiSavers. So PAYE is quite an important one not to take lightly, but GST as well, because you don't file these things for a couple of years. IRD gets they'll be in contact with you. They'll be a little upset. But at the end of the day, when people come to me to sort it all out, I can only do so much to help mitigate some of those costs. Like I can help people actually get these returns filed and payment arrangements in place, which help. But you're still going to be slapped with fees and interest to help incentivize people to repay that money at the end of the day. So, yeah, I kind of tell people it's, people ask me these questions at the time as well, because they kind of know in the back of their heads, they're like, well, should we, when's the best time to ask for an accountant? When should we have done this? Like, we're coming to you now, 2 or 3 years down the road. And I kind of say, well, you should have done it day one or day zero before you even started. No matter what the cost for an accountant is, it's probably 2 to 3 times that cost to fix it down the road. Just to fix it alone. And then you've sort of got to do all the work going forward. So, if I help people set up organizations, and if I was going to charge someone $1,000 for advice and helping them set up their organization at the start, making sure, you got the right registration in place with the company's office and the IOD, and setting up your bank accounts and accounting system, make sure that's all in place so that you have no issues going forward. If you come back to me in 2 to 3 year time because you didn't set any of that up, you're easily looking at thousands of dollars worth of my time and fees and penalties that's going to cost your organization. So unfortunately, I see that a lot, and it's just people are worried about spending that money up front. They're not sure that they're going to get value for it, or they don't see that value because I guess the value is not having these problems 2 or 3 years down the road. And people can't quite visualize that it's, if they get something wrong now, it might just sort of snowball into a big problem later on down the road. So that's probably like the biggest thing I see with people. I think sort of similar to that is structure. So people don't quite get their organization structure correct. So then, it's like, well, you're running a non-profit, but the IOD still expects you to pay income tax because you didn't quite register properly, or you registered as a company versus a charitable trust or something. So that's kind of the second thing that can cost a non-profit organization as well, is when you just didn't quite get that advice up front, and then you did what you thought was the right thing to do, but turns out it's going to cost you a bit of money down the line.
That makes sense. People don't want to do their homework. It's like the old saying, it's like you can build a fence at the top of the hill, clean the mess up at the bottom. Well, what about in terms of best practice? Like in terms of the psychological profile of people that are successful, the inputs they do, like who they reach out, how they do their funding. What do you see in terms of the gap between people that are successful at nonprofit and the ones that aren't?
I think the biggest thing is a lot of these people who get into nonprofits and charities, like their heart is in the right place to begin with, and almost all the time they're actually really good at what they do. But what they do is delivering community or public benefits. That's what they're really good at. They're not really good at paperwork, office stuff. They're like normally hands-on, like I can deliver food parcels to the homeless people, because they've had volunteer experience normally in these industries for many years. They understand operationally how things work. But it's all sort of the admin, it's the finance stuff, it's the applying for funding that can trip people up as well. They just think that, well, the money's just going to come in because I'm doing something good. That's not necessarily true. You've got to have a good application. You've got to be able to articulate your story. You've got to be able to deliver that story, and then you've got to be able to sort of report back and show how you delivered on that. Because I quite often tell people it's a lot of storytelling when you get into nonprofits. It's all, what is your values, what is your purpose, and how you're going to do that. And it's kind of like a marketing or a sales. Like you're trying to convince the funders to give you money. So you got to have a really good story, really good purpose. And so like sometimes I work with people with developing that story, you know, making sure if they've done any work in the past, photos or videos, and any feedback from people about a wonderful job you did, any referrals. And then, yeah, it's a lot of delivering that story and then making sure you actually kind of can record it so that you can report back and show what a good job you did.
What do you sort of see the good revenue strategies? Like, I mean, it wasn't that hard. Like, we just had a clipboard and we just went out and asked people. You stop 40, you sign up 4 people, maybe 2 to 4 people a day, and then you just make sure that once they're signed up, they get reinforced for that decision. You're allowing them to buy status, same way that people buy Nike. They want to signal to the world they're a certain type of person, and you want to link whatever you're selling to that, especially if it's charity. It's like all you're buying is a promise or an idea. You're not actually selling anything. So what have you seen are the successful ways to generate donations? I was going to say revenue, but we'll call it donations. Was it?
Yeah. Donations is probably a lot closer to what you just said. Not all the revenue streams are like that, but donations is a bit more status orientated because it's an individual normally, or it's coming from another organization which is run by individuals. So yeah, it is a lot more closely aligned to that status of like, I'm a donee, like I've given to this cause. So that's quite important. I guess it's like anything, it's knowing who your target audience is, or your target clientele. So for things like donations, that's very important. It's about acknowledging their donation, rewarding them, giving them that status, that feel good, because that's what they're giving you money for. That's the value proposition to them. It's like, I give you money, you make me feel good. That's what they're doing. It's not like they're giving you money and then you're giving them a t-shirt. You know, like for sale of a t-shirt, there's a different exchange. Yeah, I pay ASOS or Warehouse or whatever company I go to money for a t-shirt so I can wear that t-shirt. I don't give the warehouse money so that the staff can make me feel good. No, I want that t-shirt. And it's similar with like grant funding as well. If you look at that, sometimes that's prescribed by law. So if you've got gaming trusts or lotto or anything like this, it's under law that they have to return profits to the communities which they've taken this money out from, because we recognize that there's a societal harm to this activity, although we allow this activity in our society. So the rules are that they have to pay it back, essentially. So that's where they don't take profit. So they're allowed to take their administrative costs. And I've got opinions on that I think sometimes the salaries in these companies are far too big, because they know they collect a whole bunch of money from gambling. They pay themselves big fat stacks of cash, and then whatever's left over they give out. And then they say, hey, look, we did such a great job. We gave away our profits. And it's like, yeah, but you also paid yourself a lot of money. So it's a balancing act for sure. But I think no matter where you get your revenue from, it's really important about identifying who's giving you the money, why, what it is that they want to achieve. So some organizations, some funding organizations, they're just set up by a person or a trust or something, and it's got a clear mantra or mandate of like, you know, we want to give to Pacific Island people in the Otara region of Auckland, and it's for sports. So it's about understanding that that's what they've got a mandate for, that's their goals. And if I'm a non-profit that runs sports in sort of the South Auckland area, it's about understanding that and showing how I can deliver on that, because that's what they want to deliver on. They're not necessarily in the business of delivering those services, but they're funding people who deliver those services. So, yeah, I think it's just really understanding where you want to get your revenue from, who are those people, and why would they give to you, and
Makes
just being
sense.
able to articulate that in a nice story.
It's funny, like, yeah, that causing harm thing. It's like I go to McDonald's and then I see the Ronald McDonald houses for kids. I'm like, how do they piece
Yeah.
that puzzle away? So,
Or McDonald's on New Zealand football. I think they're still on New Zealand football. It's all that sort of stuff. And it's a bugbear of mine, but like that's because I know too much. But at the end of the day as well, I've spoken to plenty of people who I do know this other perspective on it. It's real interesting is that, well, what would be this alternative? Um, ban all gambling? Like, how's that going to be good? Then you'll have black markets and profits going to no one. And also I've heard the argument that, because quite often, like a lot of people who gamble are lower socioeconomic people as well. And I've heard this argument for why we shouldn't ban smoking as well, which is really interesting, is that it's very expensive. Like, there's so many things we can do in the world these days that it's it's a great time to be alive. Like, there's anything you could do. But unfortunately, a lot of these things are quite expensive, like traveling the world. Like, you couldn't do this 100 years ago without sort of getting dysentery on a boat and dying over 3 weeks trying to go to Australia or something. But now we can do it quite easily. But all these things are quite expensive. So if you're a poor person and you're just struggling from paycheck to paycheck, not all these fun things in life are just readily available for you. So being able to get a cheap pack of cigarettes or go down to the pokie machines to get your fun in life so that you can go back to work for the rest of the week, there is some value in that. And I've heard people talk about it, and that's definitely pulled me away from being as harsh on gambling or smoking. Obviously, there's massive downsides to these industries, which is why you got to try and figure out what the balance is, and it's not easy. But yeah, I think New Zealand law on gambling is not too bad. Like, if you look at it around the world, we don't do it too badly here. We do return money. There is a good accountability over reporting and who people give money to and funding. So at least we can see that the trail of money it comes into these gaming trusts. They get it, and then they're able to distribute it to the communities and then report back on it. So
It's interesting.
for all my criticism, it does work pretty well.
Well, I think the reality is people are going to make their choices. So you could either, when they removed alcohol, did it stop people drinking alcohol? The prohibition probably encouraged them to drink it more. So it's just like, it should be regulated. It should be clear. It shouldn't be dishonest. Like, if you're misrepresenting your product and it's causing serious harm for someone and they're not aware of it, they're not making a conscious choice, then that's a real problem. What are the most successful revenue strategies you've seen, in the sense of, is donations not a good way to go? Is partnerships a smart way to go? What are sort of the principles of the ones that work well?
I think it always depends on your organization as well, to begin with. But yeah, that's a very typical accounting answer. It depends, but that's not interesting. So a better answer is, if we look at something like a church, then it is, they're probably going to be more successful of getting donations from their members, as opposed to, or if they can, they might have a little church shop on the side. There's an extra revenue stream from them. They're probably not going to get a lot of grant funding, so it's probably not worth their time trying to get all of that. But if you look at something else like a sporting club, like we've got lots of amateur sport clubs around New Zealand, and a lot of them actually struggle a lot. And I know in certain parts of the country, to play in these competitions, whether it's union or league or another code of sport, not all of them require the clubs, the teams, to be registered entities in New Zealand, which makes it difficult on them, because if you're not a registered entity, then you can't apply for funding, you can't go out for that grant funding. So it sort of limits your revenue stream. So sometimes people end up with difficulties there. But even if you are, a lot of clubs in New Zealand still struggle. Every year they're getting money they're getting sponsorship from clothing apparel to help lower the costs. They're getting money from gaming trusts, from Lotto or whatever it is. They're trying to hit up small businesses for sponsorship. I think that's an area that's everyone's always trying to work on. It always feels difficult, even though it's been around for a while. I'd say some of the areas where, if you're a struggling charity or trust, thinking outside of the box, I think they haven't quite caught up with the rest of the world in terms of revenue generation, in terms of like social media. And so and thinking about cost of acquisition as well. So, for a sporting club, maybe you play every day, but thinking about, well, what would the cost be if we were to start live streaming our games? Okay, well, we need a camera, we need someone to film the games, we need the ability to potentially edit or upload it. And then, I don't know, is there any cost to managing social media? But now you've created a bit of content, and using that content, you can now attract, from a revenue point of view, do you attract more sponsors? And you're like, hey, we can put your logo on here for a fee per video, or a commitment to the club over 1 to 2 or 3 years or something, and we'll recognize you as a sponsor. This video content as well, you can also create highlights and attract new players into the club, so that, and you can generate more social media buzz, which you then, like, maybe we can make not necessarily on the videos, but we can also do appreciation posts on our social media or elsewhere. If you're sponsoring us, this is part of the package that you get. So you're now developing. So before it's, you might have been struggling to get sponsors, but now you're actually trying to develop what you're actually delivering to these sponsors. It's not just like, hey, give me money, we'll put your name on the back of a shirt, which is what a lot of people still do. But it's bringing in some of the new media marketing ideas like that. Putting your name on the back of a shirt has been around since forever. But thinking about how you can use these other marketing products or ideas about what you can do for sponsors or anything. And like, hey, look, maybe you grow your club really big and you can start doing other ideas. I don't know what, but like, it's just like getting outside of, what we normally do is we play rugby. But thinking about, well, we struggle to do that and get enough income from our members or our sponsorships or our grant funders. What else can we do that's adjacent to what we do at a core? Like, we're not really doing anything else. We're still playing rugby, but now we've paid someone to perhaps film and edit it so that we've got videos that we can put our sponsors on, that we can send out to the public and people can watch these. And if we get some viral videos, it's more exposure for our sponsors. So then they're more happy to give us more money, because I guess at the end of the day, it's about making sure you get more revenue, or at least the same amount of revenue, so you can continue doing whatever you're doing.
Yeah, well, since they're just trying to buy an association, like, I think it all stems from community. It's like, if you've got an audience people want to pay to be in front of, or a brand that they can associate with, which will help their conversion or their standing in the market. Because I think it all comes from community. Like, I think where there's a gap, let's say you have a particular thing you help with, but there's complementary industries. And let's say you ran events consistently, like where you just had speakers on, let's say, software. So you have New Zealand's leading tech people talking at the event, recording the event, and people are paying for the opportunity to come. And then you get sponsorships outside of that. But it's an education piece. You're actually developing and growing that community and helping them, instead of being like, hey, you're a bad person because you don't care about kids. You know what I mean? Like, I just think that's fundamentally how they do it, and it's flawed, in my opinion. I work with a lot of the major charities in Australasia, and I was just like, so my job is to guilt trip people to give me money. Is that what I'm doing? And funnily enough, if they have their own charity, those are the best clients, because people feel bad and try to talk down the other charity and try to convince them to get that money. But actually what you want to do is to validate the identity. So you validate them for the choices they make, which leads to them feeling good about that. And then they transfer that onto your charity, because they're the type of person that pays money and they don't want to go against that. But anyways, what's your closing remarks to these non-profits? What should they know? What should they think about?
I guess the most important thing to do is get advice up front. Now, even if you can't afford to pay for full advice, at least starting a relationship with other people who are going to be useful down the line. So obviously, I run an accounting practice for nonprofits and charities. Other people you might want to find is lawyers, or perhaps if you're thinking you might have a social media presence. A lot of people are happy to sit down and have a chat with you, whether it's for half an hour or an hour, about your goals and aspirations. for free, because there's a lot of value that you will get out of that 1 hour, as well as developing a potential relationship. And then if you go away and do the work and you stay in touch with this person, at some point you're probably going to have to start paying some fees, but you've at least started the conversation. They're going to be able to give you some really good information that's going to get the ball rolling for you. And then before you sort of get into trouble, you've already soaked in a bit of that info. You're like, right, now's probably the time to actually go get the real advice. We've just started, we've been operating a few months, really need to get this sorted, just to avoid any headaches in the future. And those headaches are probably what you've already been told from that free half an hour, 1 hour catch up. So it's just really important not to sort of leave these sort of things, because you don't know what you don't know.